Everyone thinks AI is getting cheaper, more models, more tools, more companies building on top of it. That's how software works. But AI is not getting cheaper. It's getting more expensive. Training a single AI model today can cost more than building an entire tech startup. And that cost is still increasing. So something doesn't make sense. If technology improves, why does it cost more every time? Because AI is not scaling like software. It's scaling like something else. And this is where the system starts to break. Because once cost becomes the constraint, everything else starts to change. Fewer companies can build models. Fewer companies can scale them. Fewer companies can compete. Most companies are already locked out of building frontier AI. And this is not a temporary problem, it's structural. Because the more AI improves, the more expensive it becomes to keep up. So this is no longer just a technology story. It's a capital story, a system where cost defines who can participate. And this is the part nobody talks about. The dominant assumption is simple. Technology gets cheaper over time, software scales. And when software scales, cost goes down. This is how the internet grew. This is how SaaS grew. So naturally, we expect AI to follow the same path. Better models, more users, lower costs. But that assumption is wrong, because AI is not just software. It is execution, and execution requires infrastructure, data centers, GPUs, energy, cooling. These are not digital layers. They are physical systems. And physical systems behave differently. They don't scale towards zero cost. They scale with capital, and capital introduces limits. And this is where the model breaks, because once AI depends on infrastructure, it inherits the rules of industry, not software. And this difference is not theoretical. It shows up in how these systems are built. A software product can be copied instantly, or an AI system cannot. Because every improvement requires execution. More compute, more infrastructure, more capital. And that means scaling AI is not about distribution, it's about investment. And investment creates limits. Because not everyone can afford to keep scaling. AI improves with scale. Better models come from more compute, so the industry pushes for more compute. But this is where the system starts to change. Because scaling compute is not a simple increase. It creates a chain reaction. More compute requires more GPUs. More GPUs require more interconnection. More interconnection requires higher bandwidth. Higher bandwidth requires more energy. More energy requires more cooling. More cooling requires larger infrastructure. And each layer adds cost on top of cost. This is not linear scaling. This is compounding cost. And this is the first structural shift, because performance improves, but cost accelerates faster. This creates a second problem. Each improvement becomes harder to justify because the gain is incremental, but the cost is exponential. This breaks the logic of software. In software, scale reduces cost. In AI, scale increases cost. Scale is no longer reducing cost, it's increasing it. And this creates a second layer of complexity. Time. Training a frontier model is not instantaneous. It takes weeks, sometimes months. During that time, thousands of GPUs run continuously. Energy consumption does not stop. Cooling systems do not stop. Infrastructure is under constant load. This is sustained industrial activity. And sustained activity compounds cost even further. Now, add coordination. These systems are not simple. They require synchronization across thousands of machines. Data must move continuously. Failures must be avoided. Downtime becomes extremely expensive, and this introduces friction, operational complexity, risk, inefficiency. All of it adds cost. And this leads to a real-world consequence. Companies are no longer scaling because they want to. They are scaling because they have to. Because if they stop investing, they fall behind. This creates an arms race. And that arms race is extremely expensive. We can already see this in practice. Companies like Microsoft, Google, and Amazon are investing tens of billions of dollars in AI infrastructure, not as an option, as a requirement, because without infrastructure, they cannot compete. And this reveals the underlying mechanism. AI is not scaling like software. It is scaling like industry, and industry scales with capital, which means cost becomes the limiting factor. And this is where the system reaches a limit, not a technical limit, a financial one, because at some point, adding more compute no longer makes economic sense. The cost grows faster than the value, and when that happens, only a few players can continue. Everyone else slows down or stops. And once cost becomes the constraint, the structure of the industry changes, because not everyone can afford to operate in this system. The cost of participation becomes a barrier, and that barrier filters out most players. Most companies are already locked out, not because they lack talent, not because they lack ideas, but because they lack capital. And this is where the system becomes asymmetric. A small number of companies control infrastructure. Everyone else depends on them. That dependence defines power. Because if you depend on someone else's infrastructure, you do not control your cost. And if you do not control cost, you do not control scale. And if you do not control scale, you do not control the market. This creates a clear dynamic. Cost determines access. Access determines competition. Competition determines power. And that power concentrates. Because capital is not evenly distributed. And infrastructure is not easily replicated. Which means new entrants face structural barriers, not temporary ones. Structural ones. Scale is closing the market, not opening it. And this has a direct consequence. Innovation becomes dependent on a few players. The direction of AI is no longer defined by the best ideas. It is defined by who can afford to execute them. And that changes the nature of the industry. Because this is no longer an open technological field. It is a controlled industrial system. And in that system, power belongs to those who can afford to build it. So the real limit of AI is not technology, it is cost. AI is not constrained by what can be built. It is constrained by what can be afforded, and affordability is not neutral. It is a filter, a gate, a mechanism that decides who can compete and who cannot. Artificial intelligence looks like software, but behaves like infrastructure. It scales with capital. It concentrates with cost. AI is not getting cheaper. It's getting more expensive. And in that system, power belongs to those who can afford to build it. And this is the industry code.